9-year-old girl warned Dad about going for a business meeting. What happened next saved his life and revealed the darkest secret between his wife and his best friend. Hello everyone. Welcome to our story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Daddy, please. I'm begging you, don't leave this house today. David Johnson stopped walking. He had just come down the big staircase in his beautiful house, fixing his red tie with one hand and holding his briefcase with the other. But now, standing right in front of him and blocking his way was Rachel, his 9-year-old daughter. She was still wearing her white pajamas with little pink flowers on them. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. Her small hands were pressed together like she was praying. She was shaking all over. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" David asked softly. Rachel looked up at her tall daddy. Her voice was shaking too. "Please, Daddy, don't go to work today. Something terrible will happen if you leave this house." David looked confused. "What are you talking about, princess?" "I had a dream last night, Daddy. A very scary dream. You were wearing that same navy blue suit you have on right now. You got in your big black car and drove away. But you never ever came back home. There was chaos everywhere and people were crying and screaming your name. Please, please don't go." David stared down at his little girl. The air in their big fancy house suddenly felt different. Cold and heavy. This wasn't just a silly dream that would make grown-ups smile and pat her head. Rachel looked really scared. More scared than he had ever seen her. His phone started buzzing in his pocket. It was probably Silas calling again. Silas was his best friend and business partner, and he was calling because David was running late for the most important meeting of his life. Rich people from another country were waiting to give them millions of dollars to build shopping centers and hotels together. "Come on, sweetheart," David said, his voice gentle but worried. "Daddy really has to go to work today. This meeting is very important." "Please, Daddy," Rachel whispered, and more tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know I'm just a little girl, but I had to tell you. If I stay quiet and something bad happens to you, I'll never be able to forgive myself for the rest of my life." Just then they heard the sound of high heels clicking on the tiled stairs. Veronica was coming down. She walked slowly, her silk robe tied around her waist, her face already perfect with makeup even though it was still early morning. She stopped when she saw Rachel standing in front of David. "What exactly is going on here?" Veronica asked in a cold voice. "She's telling me I shouldn't leave the house today," David said, not looking away from his daughter. Veronica walked closer and crossed her arms. "And why is that?" Rachel didn't move from where she was standing. She looked up at her stepmother with frightened eyes. "I had a terrible dream about Daddy. Something really bad will happen if he goes to work today." Veronica's face changed. Her lips became a thin, straight line. Her eyes got narrow and mean-looking. "David, this is completely ridiculous. You cannot miss the most important business meeting of your entire life because of a child's silly nightmare." "But what if she's right?" David started to say. "What if nothing?" Veronica's voice became sharp and angry. "Do you have any idea how much money you'll lose? Do you know how angry those investors will be? Silas has worked day and night for months to set this meeting up." Rachel grabbed her father's big hand with both of her small ones. "Daddy, please listen to me. I've never been more scared in my whole life. When I woke up from that dream, my heart was beating so fast I thought it would jump right out of my chest." David looked down at his daughter. Her little hand felt so warm and soft in his big strong one. In all his years of making money and building his successful company, he had learned one very important thing. Sometimes you have to trust the feelings in your heart. And right now, looking at Rachel's tears and seeing how scared she was, something deep inside his heart was telling him to listen to her. But then his phone rang again. This time he answered it. "David, where are you?" It was Silas, his best friend since college. Silas sounded worried and a little angry. "The investors are here at the office. They're asking for you. This deal could make us both rich beyond our wildest dreams." David looked at Rachel, who was still holding his hand tightly. Then he looked at Veronica, who was tapping her foot impatiently on the tiled floor. "Silas, something's come up at home," David said slowly. "What could be more important than this meeting?" Silas asked. "David, these people flew here from New York just to meet with us. If you don't show up, they'll think we're not serious about business." Rachel tugged on her father's hand. She looked up at him with eyes full of tears and whispered, "Please, Daddy, please don't go." David felt his heart breaking. He had never seen his little girl so scared. Not even when she had nightmares about monsters under her bed. This was different. This felt real. He made a choice that would change everything. "Silas, I can't come today. Handle the meeting without me." Are you crazy? Silas's voice got loud through the phone. David, you can't be serious. I'm sorry, but I have to stay home today. David hung up the phone before Silas could say anything else. Veronica's mouth fell open. Have you completely lost your mind? She screamed. Do you know what you just did? You just threw away millions of dollars because of a 9-year-old's bad dream. But Rachel smiled for the first time that morning. She hugged her father's leg tightly. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for listening to me. David picked up his daughter and held her close. It's okay, princess. Daddy's staying home today. Veronica shook her head in disgust. This is the stupidest thing you've ever done, David Johnson. When you lose everything, don't come crying to me. She stomped back upstairs, her heels making angry sounds on the tiled steps. David carried Rachel to the kitchen and made her some hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. They sat together at the big dining table, and for the first time in months, David wasn't thinking about work or money. He was just happy to be with his little girl. But then, exactly 37 minutes later, David's phone rang. The voice on the other end was serious and official. Mr. Johnson? This is Officer Martinez with the city police. David's heart started beating fast. Yes, this is David Johnson. Sir, I'm calling about your car. There's been a terrible accident. The hot chocolate mug slipped from David's hand and crashed on the floor, spilling brown liquid everywhere. What do you mean? David whispered. Your driver was taking your black Mercedes to pick you up for your business meeting. But on Highway 95 something went wrong. The brakes failed completely. The car crashed into a truck at full speed and caught on fire. I'm very sorry to tell you this, sir, but your driver didn't survive. David couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He couldn't move. Rachel looked at her father's white face and knew immediately what had happened. She climbed onto his lap and put her small arms around his neck. It's okay, Daddy, she whispered in his ear. You're safe now. The dream can't hurt you because you listened to me. David held his daughter tight and realized the most important truth of his life. His 9-year-old little girl had just saved him from dying. If he had gone to that meeting like he planned, he would have been in that car. He would have been burned alive in that crash. But as David sat there, holding Rachel and thanking God that he was still alive, he had no idea that the car accident was not really an accident at all. Someone had wanted him dead. And the people he trusted most in the world, his beautiful wife and his best friend, were not who they pretended to be. This was only the beginning of the most dangerous time in David Johnson's life. David hung up the phone after talking to Officer Martinez. His hands were shaking as he stared at the broken mug on the kitchen floor. Hot chocolate was spreading everywhere, but he couldn't move to clean it up. His driver was dead. The car was destroyed. If he had gone to that meeting, he would have been burned alive. Rachel was still sitting on his lap, her small arms around his neck. It's okay, Daddy, she whispered. You're safe now. My God, David said quietly. You saved my life, princess. Your dream, it really happened. Rachel nodded against his shoulder. I told you, Daddy. David held his daughter tighter. He had never believed in things like dreams that come true or children who could see the future. But now he had no choice but to believe. His little girl had a special gift, and that gift had kept him alive. Just then they heard the sound of high heels clicking on the tiled floor. Veronica walked into the kitchen, still wearing her silk robe. She looked at the broken mug and the spilled hot chocolate. What happened here? She asked in an annoyed voice. David looked up at his wife. Veronica, you're not going to believe this. There was a terrible car accident. My driver, he's dead. Veronica stopped walking. For just a moment, her face looked shocked. But then something strange happened. Instead of running to David to hug him, instead of crying with relief that he was safe, Veronica let out a long, tired sigh. Well, that's just sad, she said, rolling her eyes. Now we'll have to find a new driver. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find good help these days? David stared at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. Veronica, don't you understand? If I had gone to that meeting like I planned, I would have been in that car. I would be dead right now. Veronica shrugged and walked to the coffee machine. But you're not dead, are you? You're sitting right here, perfectly fine, because you decided to listen to a child's silly dream instead of going to work like a responsible adult. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. His wife sounded angry that he was alive. She sounded irritated that he had stayed home. Silly dream? David said, his voice getting louder. Rachel's dream saved my life. Oh, please, Veronica said, pouring herself coffee. It was just a coincidence. Cars crash every day. The fact that you stayed home has nothing to do with it. Rachel lifted her head from David's shoulder and looked at Veronica with big, sad eyes. I'm sorry you're upset, Mommy Veronica. I just didn't want Daddy to get hurt. Veronica turned around and waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. Rachel, enough with these childish stories. You're 9 years old. It's time to stop believing in fairy tales. Over the next few days, something terrible started happening. Veronica became meaner and meaner to Rachel, especially when David wasn't around. First, she would snap at Rachel for small things like spilling milk or playing too loudly. "Can't you do anything right?" she would say with an angry voice. Then she started saying cruel things. "Your father would be happier if you stopped bothering him with your silly stories," Veronica told Rachel while she was doing homework. But the worst thing happened on Friday morning. As soon as David left for work, Veronica sat down across from Rachel at the breakfast table. "Rachel, we need to talk," she said in a fake sweet voice that felt dangerous. "About what?" Rachel asked nervously. "About your little performance on Monday. All that crying and begging about your dream." Veronica made mean finger quotes in the air. "It wasn't a performance," Rachel said quietly. "Oh, but it was. You wanted attention, so you made up a story. And now you need to stop." Veronica leaned forward with cold eyes. "If you keep telling these lies, people will think you're crazy. They might send you away to a hospital for children who can't tell the difference between real life and make-believe." Rachel's face went white. "They would send me away from Daddy?" Veronica smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Only if you keep acting crazy instead of normal." Rachel started crying. "I'm not lying. I really did have that dream." "Here's what's going to happen," Veronica said firmly. "You're going to stop these ridiculous stories. You're going to stop trying to get attention. And if you don't, I'll tell your father that you're the reason he's losing money. That his business partners think he's not serious because he listens to a child's fairy tales. Do you want that?" Rachel shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Good. Now get ready for school. And remember what I said." As Rachel gathered her school bag with shaking hands, she felt more alone than ever. The woman who was supposed to take care of her was being cruel and mean. And now she was scared to tell her father about her dreams, even if they could save his life. But Rachel didn't know that things were about to get much worse. Because that very afternoon she would have another dream. A dream about her father doing something that would destroy everything. And this time she wouldn't know if she should tell him or stay quiet like Veronica had ordered her to do. That Friday afternoon, Rachel came home from school feeling tired and sad. Veronica's mean words from that morning were still echoing in her head. She went straight to her room and lay down on her bed, still wearing her school uniform. She didn't mean to fall asleep, but the stress and sadness had worn her out. Soon she was deep in a dream. But this wasn't a normal, happy dream. This was one of her special dreams, the kind that showed her things that were going to happen. In her dream, Rachel saw her father sitting at a big, shiny table in an office building. He was wearing his best gray suit, and his face looked excited. Across from him sat two men in expensive suits, the investors that Silas had been talking about. And next to her father was Silas himself, smiling and nodding. "Just sign right here, David," Silas was saying in the dream, pointing to a stack of papers. "This will make us both very rich men." David picked up a golden pen and started to write his name. But as soon as the pen touched the paper, everything in the dream turned dark and scary. Rachel saw her father's face change from happy to shocked to terrified. "What have I done?" Dream David was saying, staring at the papers. "What have I done?" The investors were laughing, but it was mean laughter. And Silas wasn't smiling anymore. His face looked cold and evil. "You've signed away everything, my old friend," Dream Silas said. "Your company, your money, your house. It's all ours now." Rachel saw her father trying to grab the papers back, but they turned into ashes in his hands. Then she saw their beautiful house with a big for sale sign in the front yard. She saw her father crying, and herself living in a tiny, dirty apartment. But the worst part of the dream was seeing Veronica and Silas together, counting piles of money and laughing about how stupid David had been. Rachel woke up with a scream. She sat up in her bed, her heart beating so fast it felt like it might jump out of her chest. Her pajamas were soaked with sweat and she was shaking all over. "Oh no," she whispered to herself. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." She looked at the clock on her nightstand. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. Her father would be home from work in about an hour. She had to tell him about the dream. She had to warn him not to sign any papers. But then she remembered Veronica's words from that morning. "If you keep telling these ridiculous stories, I'll make sure your father knows how much trouble you're causing." Rachel felt torn in two. If she told her father about the dream, Veronica would be furious. She might really convince Daddy that Rachel was just a troublemaker. But if she didn't tell him and he signed those papers, they would lose everything. Rachel sat on her bed for 20 minutes trying to decide what to do. Finally, she made up her mind. She had to tell her father no matter what Veronica said. The dream felt too real, too important to keep secret. She ran downstairs to wait for David to come home. Veronica was in the living room talking on her phone in a quiet voice. When she saw Rachel, she quickly hung up. "What are you doing down here?" Veronica asked with narrowed eyes. "Waiting for Daddy," Rachel said, trying to sound normal. "Well, go wait in your room. I'm expecting guests soon." "What guests?" "Adult guests. None of your business." Rachel didn't want to go back to her room, but she was scared of making Veronica angry. So she went upstairs but left her bedroom door open just a crack so she could hear when her father's car pulled into the driveway. At 5:30, she heard the familiar sound of David's black Mercedes, the new one he had bought after the accident. Rachel's heart started beating fast again. She ran downstairs just as her father was walking through the front door. "Daddy," she called out. David smiled when he saw his daughter running toward him. "Hello, princess. How was school?" Rachel threw her arms around his waist and hugged him tight. "Daddy, I need to tell you something very important." David could feel that Rachel was shaking. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You're trembling." "I had another dream, Daddy. A really scary one." David's face became serious. After what had happened with the car accident, he knew to pay attention when Rachel talked about her dreams. "Tell me about it," he said, kneeling down to her level. Rachel took a deep breath. "You were in an office with Uncle Silas and some men in suits. They wanted you to sign papers. But Daddy, you can't sign them. In my dream, when you signed those papers, we lost everything. Our house, your company, all our money. Uncle Silas and the other men took it all away from you." David's face went pale. "Papers? What kind of papers?" "I don't know exactly, but they were important business papers. Uncle Silas kept saying they would make you rich, but it was a lie. Please, Daddy, promise me you won't sign any papers until you read them very, very carefully." Just then they heard Veronica's heels clicking on the tiled floor as she walked toward them. "David, you're home," she said in a fake bright voice. "And I see Rachel is telling you more of her silly stories." David stood up but kept one hand on Rachel's shoulder. "She's telling me about a dream she had. About me signing some papers." Veronica's face changed for just a split second. She looked worried. But then she smiled again quickly. "Oh, David, surely you're not going to fall for this again? We've talked about this. Children have overactive imaginations." "But her last dream saved my life," David said quietly. "That was just a coincidence." Veronica's voice got a little sharp. "You can't run your business based on what a 9-year-old dreams about." Before David could answer, the doorbell rang. "Oh," Veronica said, clapping her hands together. "That must be our guests." "What guests?" David asked. "Silas and the investors. Didn't I tell you? They're coming here tonight to discuss the new business deal. Since you missed the meeting on Monday, Silas arranged for them to come to our house instead." David felt his stomach drop. Rachel's dream was about him signing papers with Silas and some investors. And now they were here at his house, ready to make a deal. Rachel grabbed her father's hand tightly. "Daddy, please remember what I told you," she whispered. The doorbell rang again. "I'll get it," Veronica said quickly, rushing toward the front door before David could move. David felt Rachel's small hand squeeze his tightly. She was looking up at him with frightened eyes. "Remember what I told you, Daddy?" she whispered. "Don't sign anything." Veronica opened the big wooden door and in walked 3 men. The first one was Silas, David's best friend, wearing an expensive black suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Behind him were 2 other men that David had never seen before. They were tall and serious-looking, with cold eyes and perfectly pressed suits. "David," Silas called out with a big smile, spreading his arms wide. "There's my business partner. I hope you're feeling better after that terrible accident on Monday." "Hello, Silas," David said carefully. He noticed that Silas's smile looked fake, just like it had when he visited earlier that week. "Let me introduce you to our investors," Silas continued, gesturing to the 2 men behind him. "This is Mr. Richardson and Mr. Blake. They flew here all the way from Europe just to meet you." Mr. Richardson stepped forward and shook David's hand. His grip was too tight and his smile was cold. "Mr. Johnson, we've heard so much about you. Silas tells us you're ready to make some serious money. And this must be your lovely wife," Mr. Blake said, looking at Veronica with admiring eyes. Veronica smiled and did a little curtsy. "Welcome to our home." Can I get you anything to drink? That would be wonderful, Silas said. We have a lot to discuss tonight. Rachel was still standing next to her father, holding his hand. She stared at the three men with big worried eyes. Something about them made her feel scared, especially the way they looked at her father, like hungry wolves looking at a sheep. And who is this little angel? Mr. Richardson asked, looking down at Rachel. That's my daughter, Rachel, David said, putting his other hand protectively on Rachel's shoulder. Such a beautiful child, Mr. Blake said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Maybe she should go play in her room while the grown-ups talk business? Actually, that's a good idea, David said, looking down at Rachel. He could see that the men made her uncomfortable, and this was important business. Princess, why don't you go to your room for a while? Daddy needs to have a grown-up meeting. Rachel looked up at her father with worried eyes. She wanted to tell him again about her dream, about how dangerous these men were. But Daddy... It's okay, sweetheart. I'll come check on you later. I promise I'll be careful. Rachel didn't want to leave, but she could see that David wanted her to go. She nodded sadly and walked slowly up the stairs, looking back at her father one more time before disappearing into her room. Now then, Silas said, rubbing his hands together once Rachel was gone. Let's get down to business. David, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. David sat down in his favorite armchair. Veronica appeared with a tray of expensive wine glasses, serving everyone while listening carefully to every word. Silas opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. These gentlemen represent a group of very wealthy European investors. They want to partner with us to build luxury hotels and shopping centers across the entire country. Mr. Richardson leaned forward. We're talking about a $50 million investment, Mr. Johnson. But we need a decision tonight. Tonight? David asked, surprised. I'm afraid so, Mr. Blake said, checking his expensive watch. We fly back to New York tomorrow morning. If we don't have a signed agreement by then, we'll have to look for other partners. Silas spread the papers across the coffee table. David, this deal will make us both incredibly rich. More money than we ever dreamed of. But I haven't even seen the contracts yet, David said. Don't worry about the details, Silas said quickly. I've been working on this for months. Everything is perfect. All you have to do is sign and we're set for life. Veronica sat down next to David, her eyes shining with excitement. Honey, this sounds amazing. Think about what we could do with $50 million. David picked up the first page of the contract and started reading. The words were complicated and full of legal language. Time is really running out, Mr. Richardson said impatiently. Our plane leaves first thing in the morning. David, Silas said, his voice urgent, you have to trust me on this. We've been best friends for 15 years. Have I ever led you wrong? David looked at the eager faces around him. Everyone seemed so excited, so sure this was the right thing to do. But then he remembered Rachel's tearful eyes and her desperate voice. Please, Daddy, promise me you won't sign any papers until you read them very, very carefully. I understand this is a great opportunity, David said slowly, but this is a huge decision. I need some time to think about it. The room became quiet. Silas's smile faded. Time to think about it? Mr. Blake said, sounding annoyed. Mr. Johnson, we've already told you, we leave tomorrow morning. I know, but... David, Veronica interrupted, her voice sharp with disappointment. These gentlemen have come all this way. You can't just ask them to wait. I'm not asking them to wait, David said firmly. I'm saying I need time to review these contracts properly. This is my entire business we're talking about. Silas stood up, his face showing frustration. David, what's gotten into you? You're acting like you don't trust me. It's not about trust, Silas. It's about being smart with business. The two investors exchanged angry looks. Mr. Richardson closed his briefcase with a snap. Well, Mr. Johnson, he said coldly, if you're not ready to do serious business, perhaps we should look elsewhere. I understand, David said. I'm sorry, but I need at least a few days to review everything. The three men left David's house angry and disappointed. Veronica didn't speak to David for the rest of the evening. The next morning, David called his lawyer, Mr. Peterson, and asked him to come to his office right away. I need you to look at these contracts, David said, handing over the thick stack of papers Silas had left behind. Mr. Peterson, an older man with gray hair and glasses, sat down and began reading carefully. After an hour, his face looked very serious. David, he said, looking up from the papers, there are some very strange things in these contracts. What kind of strange things? Well, for one thing, these invoices here, they don't look right. The numbers have been changed and some of them are completely fake. David felt his stomach drop. Fake. And look at this, Mr. Peterson continued, pointing to another page. According to this, large amounts of money have been taken out of your company accounts over the past 6 months. Did you approve these withdrawals? No, David said, his voice barely a whisper. I never saw these before. Mr. Peterson kept reading, his frown getting deeper. David, this contract wouldn't have made you rich. It would have destroyed you. Look at this clause here. It says that you would be personally responsible for any losses. If anything went wrong, you would lose your house, your company, everything. David sat down heavily in his chair. Are you saying that Silas was trying to trick me? I'm saying that if you had signed this contract, within a year you would have been bankrupt and probably in jail. Someone has been stealing money from your company and making it look like you did it. David felt like the room was spinning. His best friend, the man he trusted more than anyone in the world except Rachel, had been planning to destroy him. How long has this been going on? David asked. From what I can see here, at least 6 months. Maybe longer. David put his head in his hands. Silas has been my partner for 15 years. Why would he do this to me? I don't know why, David. But I know that your daughter saved you from losing everything. If you had signed these papers last night, by now you would have no money, no house, and no business left. David thought about Rachel's frightened face and her desperate pleas not to sign anything. His 9-year-old daughter had seen the danger that he, a grown man with years of business experience, had completely missed. What do I do now? David asked. We need to gather more evidence, Mr. Peterson said. And David, you need to be very careful. If Silas realizes that you know what he's been doing, he might try something even more dangerous. David nodded, but inside he felt sick. The people he loved and trusted most, his wife and his best friend, had been working together to destroy his life. Only his little girl had tried to protect him. And he was starting to realize that the danger was far from over. That evening, David drove home with his mind racing. Mr. Peterson's words kept echoing in his head. If Silas realizes that you know what he's been doing, he might try something even more dangerous. But David had already made his decision. He wouldn't let them know he suspected anything. Instead, he would play their game while secretly gathering evidence to expose them both. As he pulled into his driveway, David took a deep breath and prepared to act like nothing had changed. He had to protect Rachel, and the only way to do that was to make Silas and Veronica believe they were still winning. Daddy? Rachel came running down the hallway as he entered through the front door. I was so worried. Did you sign those papers? No, Princess. I didn't sign anything. David hugged her tightly but kept his voice casual. The investors had to leave town, so we're going to meet again next week. Rachel looked up at him with relief in her eyes. Good, Daddy. I'm still worried about those papers. Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything is going to be fine. David forced a smile, even though his heart was breaking. He hated lying to Rachel, but he needed to keep her safe while he figured out how to stop Silas and Veronica. Just then, they heard Veronica's heels clicking on the tiled floor as she approached the kitchen. Oh, David. You're home, she said with a bright smile. How did your day go? Did you have a chance to think more about that wonderful opportunity Silas brought us? David put on his best acting face. Actually, yes. I've been thinking about it all day and I think you're right. This could be exactly what we need. Veronica's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. Really? Oh, David, that's wonderful. So you'll sign the contracts. Well, I want to be smart about it, David said, trying to sound eager but cautious. I was thinking I should call Silas tomorrow and tell him I'm ready to move forward. Maybe we can arrange another meeting with those investors. That's perfect. Veronica clapped her hands together. I knew you'd see what an amazing opportunity this is. Rachel tugged on David's sleeve. Daddy, can I talk to you about my homework? Of course, Princess. David smiled at his daughter, grateful for the excuse to get away from Veronica's excited questioning. As they walked upstairs, David whispered to Rachel, Everything is going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise. Over the next few days, David played his part perfectly. He called Silas and told him he was ready to sign the contracts. He even acted excited about the money they would make. I'm sorry I was so cautious before, David told Silas over lunch. You know how I get with big business deals. Don't worry about it, buddy, Silas replied with a big smile. I'll contact the investors and set up another meeting. This is going to make us both very rich. But secretly, David was working with Mr. Peterson to gather evidence. They discovered records showing that Veronica had been receiving payments from Silas for months. They found proof that Silas had been stealing money and planning to frame David for the theft. "We need to catch them talking about their plans," Mr. Peterson advised. "If we can record them admitting what they're doing, we'll have everything we need." For the next 2 weeks, David continued his careful act. He smiled at Veronica over breakfast, discussed business deals with enthusiasm, and even called Silas to chat about their upcoming investor meeting. But inside he was preparing for the moment when he would expose them both. Rachel seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. She stayed closer to her father than usual, and sometimes David would catch her watching Veronica with those wise, knowing eyes that seemed far too old for a 9-year-old. Then, one Thursday afternoon, the moment David had been waiting for finally arrived. "David, I have some bad news," Veronica said, appearing in his study doorway with a concerned expression. "My father is very sick. The doctors say it might be serious." David looked up from his papers, studying her face carefully. Something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she had practiced these words in front of a mirror. "I'm sorry to hear that," David said. "How sick is he?" "Sick enough that I need to go see him right away. I was hoping to drive up to his house this afternoon and stay overnight. Would that be all right?" David nodded sympathetically. "Of course. Family comes first. Do you want me to come with you?" No, Veronica said quickly. "You have that important conference call with the Tokyo investors this evening. I'll be fine going alone." After Veronica left, David sat in his study thinking. In all the years he had known Veronica, she had never mentioned her father being sick. In fact, she rarely talked about her family at all. And she had seemed almost eager for him not to come with her. Something wasn't right. David made a decision that would change everything. He called his assistant and told her to reschedule the conference call, then quietly got in his car and followed the road Veronica had taken. Instead of driving toward the highway that led to her father's town, Veronica's car turned into the parking lot of the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown. David parked across the street and watched as she walked confidently through the lobby entrance. His heart pounding, David waited a few minutes, then followed her inside. The hotel lobby was busy with business travelers and tourists, making it easy for David to blend in. He spotted Veronica getting into an elevator, and he quickly noted that it stopped on the 7th floor. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, David reached the 7th floor just in time to see Veronica disappearing into room 712. Through the slightly open door, he could hear voices, Veronica's voice, and another voice that made his blood run cold. "Silas." David crept closer to the door, his heart beating so loud he was sure they would hear it. But the voices inside were too absorbed in their conversation to notice anything else. "Everything is going perfectly," he heard Silas say. "David is completely convinced that he wants to sign the contracts. He even apologized to me for being suspicious." "Good," Veronica replied. "I was getting worried that his brat of a daughter had poisoned his mind against us completely." David felt sick hearing his wife refer to Rachel that way, but he forced himself to keep listening. "Once he signs tomorrow, how long before we can transfer all the money?" Veronica asked. "The beauty of this plan is that it will look like David authorized everything himself," Silas said with a laugh. "By the time he realizes what's happened, we'll be living comfortably in the Cayman Islands, and he'll be bankrupt and probably in prison." David quietly pulled out his phone and started recording. "I still can't believe you convinced me to marry him," Veronica said. 3 years of pretending to love that boring man and his annoying daughter. It was the only way to get close enough to access his accounts and gain his complete trust," Silas replied. "And you have to admit the plan worked perfectly. He never suspected a thing." "Well, almost perfectly," Veronica said bitterly. "If it wasn't for that little girl and her stupid dreams, he would have been dead in that car accident months ago, and we would have inherited everything without all this complicated fraud." David had heard enough. With his phone still recording, he took a deep breath and pushed open the hotel room door. Both Veronica and Silas spun around, their faces going white with shock. Veronica was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in the same dress she had worn when she left the house. Silas was standing by the window, a glass of champagne in his hand. For a long moment nobody spoke. The silence in the room was deafening. "David," Veronica finally stammered, jumping to her feet. "What are you doing here? I thought you had that conference call." "I rescheduled it," David said quietly, his voice eerily calm. He stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. "I was worried about your sick father." Silas set down his champagne glass with trembling hands. "David, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" David interrupted, his eyes moving between his wife and his best friend. Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with my business partner while they plan to steal everything I've worked for. Veronica's face crumpled as she realized how much he had heard. David, please let me explain. Explain what? David's voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath. Explain how you married me as part of a plan to destroy my life? Explain how you tried to have me killed in that car accident? Explain how you've been calling my daughter a brat and an annoying child behind my back. Silas stepped forward, his face desperate. David, you don't understand. The business world is changing. I was trying to protect both of us. Protect us. David's composure finally cracked and his voice rose. You were going to frame me for embezzlement and leave me bankrupt. You were going to let me go to prison while you lived in luxury in the Caribbean. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Veronica said, tears streaming down her face. David, I did care about you. I still care about you. David stared at her with a look of such profound sadness that both Veronica and Silas fell silent. You married me for this? David asked, his voice breaking slightly. 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing I had found love again after my first wife died. 3 years of thinking I had given Rachel a mother who would love her. He turned to Silas, his oldest friend, the man who had been best man at both of his weddings. And you? My best friend? The man I trusted more than my own brother? Silas opened his mouth to speak, but David held up his hand. 15 years of friendship. 15 years of building a business together. You were there when my first wife died. You helped me through the darkest period of my life. You watched Rachel take her first steps, heard her say her first words. David's voice grew quieter, more controlled, but somehow more devastating. All of it was a lie. Veronica sobbed harder. David, please? Please what? David asked. Please forgive you? Please pretend this never happened? Please sign your contracts tomorrow so you can finish destroying me? Silas tried one more time. David, we can work this out. We can find a way to make this right. David looked at him with pity. The only thing that's right is that my 9-year-old daughter has more honor and integrity than both of you combined. She tried to save me and I almost didn't listen. He pulled out his phone, still recording, and held it up so they could see. Every word you've said in the last 10 minutes has been recorded. The police will be very interested in your confession about the embezzlement, the fraudulent contracts, and especially about the car accident that was meant to kill me. Both Veronica and Silas stared at the phone in horror. David, you can't, Veronica started. I can't what? Turn in my wife and best friend for trying to destroy my life. David shook his head sadly. I not only can, I will. After a long, tense silence, David looked at them one last time. His expression wasn't angry anymore, it was something much worse. It was the look of a man whose heart had been completely broken by the people he loved most. Goodbye, Veronica. Goodbye, Silas. And with that, he turned and walked out of the hotel room, leaving them both staring after him in stunned silence. David walked through the hotel lobby in a daze, past the busy tourists and business travelers, past the elegant furniture and expensive artwork. Everything looked the same as when he had entered, but his entire world had changed. The drive home felt like it lasted forever. David's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as his mind replayed everything he had just witnessed. The woman he had married, the man he had trusted, both of them had been playing roles, pretending to care about him while planning his destruction. When he finally pulled into his driveway, David sat in his car for a moment, trying to compose himself. He couldn't let Rachel see him like this, broken and devastated. She had already been through enough. But as soon as he walked through the front door, Rachel came running down the stairs, her face filled with worry. Daddy? You're home, she cried, throwing her arms around his waist. I was scared something bad happened to you. David held his daughter tightly, and for the first time since leaving the hotel, he felt like he could breathe again. Here, in his little girl's embrace, was the only real love left in his life. I'm okay, princess, he whispered, though his voice was shaky. Rachel pulled back and looked up at him with those wise, perceptive eyes. No, you're not okay. You look very sad. Did something happen with Mommy Veronica? David's heart broke all over again. How could a 9-year-old see so clearly what he had been blind to for years? Come sit with me, David said, leading Rachel to the living room couch. Daddy needs to tell you something important. They sat down together and David pulled Rachel close to his side. For a moment he didn't know how to begin. Rachel, do you remember when you warned me not to go to that business meeting? And when you told me not to sign those papers? Rachel nodded solemnly. My dreams saved you, didn't they, Daddy? Yes, they did. They saved me in ways I didn't even understand at the time. David took a deep breath. Sweetheart, I found out today that Mommy Veronica and Uncle Silas have been lying to us. They were planning to steal all of Daddy's money and hurt our family. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look surprised. I knew it, she whispered. I could feel that they didn't really love us. They were pretending. David marveled at his daughter's intuition. You knew. Not everything, but I knew something was very wrong. Mommy Veronica looked at you like you were something she had to get rid of, not like someone she loved. And Uncle Silas smiled too much when he talked about money. David hugged Rachel tighter. I'm so sorry you had to feel scared in your own home, Princess. I should have listened to you sooner. It's okay, Daddy. You listened when it mattered most. Rachel looked up at him with such wisdom in her young eyes. Daddy, you're alive because you listened to me. Now, you must be careful who you trust. Her words hit David like a lightning bolt. His 9-year-old daughter was teaching him the most important lesson of his life. You're right, sweetheart. You've been trying to protect me all along, haven't you? Rachel nodded. That's what families do. They protect each other. David felt tears in his eyes. Yes, they do. And now Daddy is going to protect you by making sure the people who tried to hurt us can never do it again. That evening, after Rachel had gone to bed, David sat in his study with the phone recording and all the evidence Mr. Peterson had gathered. His hands were steady now, his mind clear. The shock and heartbreak were still there, but underneath was something stronger, determination. He picked up his phone and dialed Mr. Peterson's number. It's done, David said when his lawyer answered. I have everything we need. What happened? Mr. Peterson asked urgently. I followed Veronica. She wasn't visiting her sick father, she was meeting Silas at a hotel. I recorded their entire conversation. They admitted to everything. The embezzlement, the fraudulent contracts, even the car accident that was meant to kill me. There was a pause on the other end. David, that's exactly what we needed. With this recording and the financial evidence we've already gathered, we have a complete case against them. What do we do now? First thing tomorrow morning, we take everything to the police and to your company's board of directors. This ends now, David. They're going to pay for what they've done. The next morning, David dropped Rachel off at school with an extra long hug. Everything is going to be different when you come home today, Princess, he told her gently, but different in a good way. Daddy is making sure the bad people can't hurt us anymore. Rachel nodded seriously. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world. By 9 a.m., David was sitting in the police station with Mr. Peterson, playing the hotel recording for Detective Williams. The detective's expression grew grimmer with each word. Mr. Johnson, this is clear evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and potentially attempted murder regarding the car accident, Detective Williams said when the recording ended. We'll need to bring both of them in for questioning immediately. At the same time, Mr. Peterson was presenting the evidence to David's company board of directors. The reaction was swift and decisive. Silas Chin is hereby terminated from his position effective immediately, announced the board chairman. All of his access to company accounts and facilities is revoked. We will be pressing full charges for embezzlement. By noon, Silas was arrested at his office as he tried to access the company's financial systems one last time. The police found him attempting to transfer funds to an offshore account, exactly what the recording had predicted he would do. Veronica's arrest was more dramatic. She had returned home that morning, clearly believing she could continue the charade. When the police arrived at David's house with a warrant, she was in the middle of packing expensive jewelry and documents. Mrs. Johnson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement, Detective Williams announced as Veronica stared in shock. This is impossible, she stammered. David would never, he couldn't have. Your husband recorded your conversation at the Grand Plaza Hotel yesterday evening, the detective explained as he placed handcuffs on her wrists. You confessed to everything. As the police car pulled away with Veronica inside, David felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The woman he had thought he loved was gone from his life forever, but the web of lies that had trapped him was finally broken. That afternoon, when David picked up Rachel from school, she immediately noticed the change in his demeanor. Daddy, you look lighter, she said as they drove home. David smiled, his first genuine smile in weeks. That's because I am lighter, Princess. The heavy weight I've been carrying is finally gone. Are Mommy Veronica and Uncle Silas gone too? Yes, sweetheart. They won't be coming back. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm sad that they were mean to you, Daddy, but I'm happy that it's just us again. Just us again, David repeated and realized that for the first time in years, That thought didn't make him feel lonely, it made him feel free. The trial made headlines in the business section of every major newspaper. Silas was sentenced to 8 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming, not only the recording, but months of financial records showing systematic theft from David's company. Veronica received a lighter sentence of 3 years, but she lost everything. The prenuptial agreement she had signed meant she walked away from the marriage with nothing. All the jewelry, the designer clothes, the lifestyle she had married David for, all of it was gone. Justice has been served, Mr. Peterson told David after the final sentencing. But more importantly, you and Rachel are safe. Over the following months, David threw himself into rebuilding his company. He implemented new financial oversight systems, hired trustworthy employees, and slowly restored the reputation that Silas's schemes had threatened to destroy. But the real healing happened at home in the quiet moments with Rachel. Every evening after dinner, they would sit together on the living room couch. Sometimes Rachel would tell him about her day at school, and sometimes David would read to her from her favorite books. These simple moments became the foundation of their renewed relationship. "Daddy," Rachel said one evening as they watched the sunset through their living room windows, "are you lonely without a wife?" David considered the question carefully. 6 months ago he might have said yes. But now, looking at his daughter's trusting face, he knew the answer. "No, princess. I have you and you're all the family I need. Even when I grow up and move away someday?" David smiled. "Even then. Because I'll know that I raised a strong, smart, beautiful woman who can see danger coming and isn't afraid to speak up about it. A woman who knows how to protect the people she loves." Rachel beamed at him. "And I'll know that my daddy loved me enough to listen when it really mattered." A year later, David's company was stronger than it had ever been. He had turned down several marriage proposals from well-meaning friends who thought he needed a new wife. But David had learned his lesson about trusting too quickly. Rachel, now 10 years old, continued to amaze everyone around her. Her teachers marveled at her maturity and wisdom. She excelled in school, made good friends, and never once had another prophetic dream, as if her gift had served its purpose and was now at rest. On the anniversary of the day Rachel had first warned him about the business meeting, David took her out for a special dinner at her favorite restaurant. "Do you know what today is?" he asked as they shared a piece of chocolate cake. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "It's the day I saved your life by telling you about my dream. And it's the day I learned the most important lesson of my life," David said. "That the people who truly love us will always try to protect us, even when we're too stubborn or too blind to see the danger ourselves." Rachel reached across the table and took her father's hand. "We protected each other, Daddy. That's what real families do." As they walked home together under the stars, David reflected on how much his life had changed. He had lost a wife and a best friend, but he had gained something much more valuable, a deeper understanding of what real love looked like. It looked like a 9-year-old girl who cried and pleaded with her father not to get in a car because she had seen danger in her dreams. It looked like trust, honesty, and the courage to speak up when something felt wrong. It looked like the bond between a father and daughter who had survived betrayal together and emerged stronger on the other side. David never remarried. He found that his life with Rachel was complete in a way his marriage to Veronica never had been. They traveled together, laughed together, and built a life based on truth rather than deception. And sometimes, late at night when he tucked Rachel into bed, David would thank whatever force in the universe had blessed his daughter with the gift of seeing what others could not. That gift had saved his life, but more than that, it had saved his soul. Rachel grew up knowing that her voice mattered, that her instincts were valuable, and that speaking up about danger, even when adults didn't want to listen, was not only acceptable but necessary. She carried that wisdom with her always, and in the years to come, she would use it to help others just as she had once helped her father. But that night, as David turned off her bedroom light and whispered, "Sweet dreams, princess," both father and daughter slept peacefully, knowing they were exactly where they belonged, safe in the love and trust they had built together, one truthful moment at a time. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.